Good morning, I guess, for me. Good afternoon to Tim and Dan, my colleagues over in the UK. Welcome, audience, to Transatlantic Tea Time, the first of what I hope will be many Transatlantic Tea Times. I'm here in New Jersey. Dan and Tim are over in the UK, and in this first session or our first podcast, I thought it would be good for everyone to get to know the two of you. And so. Well, look, let's talk about the cutest one that's at least with us right now. Dan, who's that sitting in your lap?
This is our local mascot, Bisou, a French bulldog. So she's very much welcome in the UK, as all things French are.
Very nice. Yeah, we need to work on her getting to be the official mascot for IDS, though we are very pet friendly, so I think there'd be a fight for that. Now, to be fair to Tim, his daughter, I think, is more adorable, definitely more adorable. But Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And he actually gets to walk around outside, folks. It may be overcast and might rain on him, but takes advantage of being able to get out there on the streets of London, right?
That's it. Yeah, I live in central London. Dan and the Bisou live kind of in what we call the green belt, or kind of suburban London, the countryside, which is lovely. But I live in central London, and my wife's from Paris, so we have to be pretty close to the Eurostar, which is the tunnel train that goes under the channel. We have to have pretty quick access to France, otherwise I'm in trouble. But when it's not raining, I take a lot of phone calls on foot, move around. If they're not confidential or sensitive, I try to get some fresh air. This is actually not far from where I live. This is about 50 meters up the road. This is one of my locals. In England speak, that's your watering hole, your pub, your kind of community center. And they're still closed right now. We're still in our lockdowns, so everyone's got their masks ready if they go inside or get near other people. But things will be coming back online sooner or later here. Thanks for having me on the show, Jonathan.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with what may or may not be obvious to everyone. You're both in England. I don't think either of you necessarily has that English accent, which means you're from somewhere else. So let's start with that. And I think it'd be interesting to know, where you were from and how you ended up in the UK. And then from there, we'll talk about how you ended up with IDS. And again, our first podcast together. In future ones, we're just going to ramble about whatever we want. But this is our setting the stage chance. And so I don't care. I'll let you two fight it out. Who gets to go first? But
I would give it
let's hear.
I would give it to Dan Ruprecht. His background needs a royal scroll to list it all out. He's got more passports than my daughter.
I'll get my trumpet at this point then, right? Isn't that what they do over there in England? You've got someone with some fancy uniform and comes out with a trumpet.
Every day starts with a trumpet. I mean, you don't even wake up out of bed without the trumpet going.
That's actually how they get the news here. That's how the BBC delivers the news every morning.
I figured that.
I was born in Germany, and to a German father. He's Bavarian, was a Bavarian farmer, but made it big, becoming an engineer, and broke out of the farm life, and moved to South Africa, actually, which is where he met my mother, who is British. And so I was born in Germany and actually have a British passport. So my first citizenship was British through my mother. But neither of them wanted to live in each other's country. My mom didn't want to live in Germany. My dad didn't want to live in England. So we ended up in Canada, which is where I grew up. So we moved from Germany to the Great White North of Canada. Spent about 15 years there, then 20 years back down in the US, pretty much all up and down the East Coast. But through work, I was working for a law firm in Washington, D.C., who had an opportunity to work over in Europe, which as a lawyer, you don't really get to travel around very much when you're sort of locked into your state. So I thought it was a great opportunity to travel, and ended up spending about 5 years in Belgium, where one of my children was born. So I have two children. And after some time there, we realized that we wanted to get back to family and get close to relatives and be around cousins and aunts and uncles. So ended up back in the UK, and I'm actually living in a town called Guildford, which turns out to be about 30 minutes away from where my mother grew up. So it's kind of crazy to think how the world works. You know, it was, over 40 years of, my parents meeting in South Africa, moving to different countries, traveling all over between the various families, and to end up 30 minutes away from where my mom grew up. The world works in mysterious ways, for sure. But it's pretty cool. Wonderful. Yeah.
Pretty cool. How about you? So Tim, you've been kind of all around.
I've moved a lot. Maybe not as much as Dan, but actually probably on par. I'm actually a New England native, so European New World in quotes, but fifth generation Vermonter, all the way up in northern Vermont actually. And a lot of my, as you can tell from the surname La Tulip, which was butchered by some clerical error in the 1600s. It was. I'm from a Breton, Brittany kind of French family, I think, from genealogy study, that came into French Canada, Quebecois region, and then eventually came into what's now New England. So I've got a lot of family in that part of the world, Boston, Vermont. But I was the first of a generation, like Dan's dad, he mentioned a bit ago. I broke out of that sort of cold region of America, and I lived out in Phoenix for several years. So I went to the hottest place I could find, of course, and then continued to go west and lived in places like San Diego and San Francisco, really kind of settling into that nice beach kind of lifestyle. I met my wife in San Diego. She's Parisian, French native, had studied in the U.S. and kind of overstayed longer than she wanted to. Hopefully she's not watching this. Hopefully it's not too personal, but we didn't want to be in the U.S. because, well, she didn't want to be much longer. It was more comfortable for us to be closer to France. So at the time I was with a firm building out their European operation. They were an American consultancy, clients in London, insurance underwriter clients in London. So they moved my wife and I over. Didn't have kids at the time. Easy to move two people like that who want to move, no children. And that was 7 years ago, and I've not looked back. And in fact, we've built our family here. I've got a 19-month-old baby girl. My wife's family's across the channel in Paris. I've got some family back in the U.S., but this is really home. And you mentioned moving around a lot, but I don't think I felt I was at home anywhere until maybe 2016. After a couple of years living here, I landed here after a long flight from, God, I don't know where I was. I couldn't tell you. I think North America. But I came back and it was raining and cold, and I landed at Gatwick, kind of towards where Dan lives. And I finally felt like I was home, not just a place kind of where I, rented a house or lived or, was kind of temporarily staying. I felt like it was my home. And that's a comforting feeling for sure. Yeah,
definitely. We won't go through my movements, but not quite as exciting as yours. That's for sure, for either of you. But with a little bit of time left, because, I want to keep the mystery for our future conversations. We're coming up. Well, I guess we're about 10 months in from when you guys joined IDS. But we heard how you ended up in Europe, how you guys ended up in London or outside of London. How'd you end up here at IDS, and why IDS? I think that's a interesting question.
Yeah, you take that, Dan. I'll fill in on that too.
Sure. Well, Tim and I have been working very closely together for, I think almost 4 years now, maybe even more than 4 years. And we work on projects together with two very different perspectives, but with overlapping goals and initiatives. He comes from a very sort of technical background with forensic expertise and the like. I come from a legal perspective and really sort of building workflows and really sort of translating for the lawyers. But together we've sort of created a very sort of unique and potent approach to discovery when dealing with large scale investigations. And where we'd worked in the past and how we wanted to operate here in the UK and in Europe, although very advantageous in all our various umbrellas in terms of companies we've worked in, we really wanted to find an organization that really looked ahead. Was more of a visionary company, a company that is building for 5 years from now rather than looking back 10. And our approaches are unique. Our goals are aligned with very sort of forward-thinking clientele, and the expectation is that we think outside of the box. We do things a bit differently. We're not order takers. We really collaborate and try and find solutions and solution driven. We met our CEO Dan Regard about a little more than 2 years ago now. And very quickly we realized that we were all of like-minded views in dealing with discovery services and technology in general. And I think that's really where it was born. And I think that is the core of what IDS is. One of the best compliments when I was doing my background research on the company was a friend of mine said, IDS is built of problem solvers. That is exactly where we want to live. And that's exactly what we want to do. So I think it really is just a good fit. And it was a no-brainer when Tim and I were looking to take this somewhere. Tim, you want that?
Well, I would agree with all of it. And only add, I guess, what came to mind, and it has always stuck out in my mind, is that the company, I mean, the firm generally, IDS, really, they were like-minded not only how they want to approach matters as being problem solvers, not, I've got these 4 things on a shelf, I hope you buy them, you can stuff your data into them kind of machine. I was very pleased that the organization doesn't take that approach, which is a rarity, particularly in this part of the world. There are a lot of American firms that are over here that take a different approach that isn't always well suited or best fit for clients' needs here. But the thing that I also liked was the sort of attention to cultural sensitivity, because while we do speak the same language in the UK, everyone speaks some flavor or dialect of English as a first language. The culture is very, very different in quite a few pronounced ways, but also Europe in general is the remit for Dan and I. And a lot of the countries we work in, Austria, Germany, France, have very sensitive data protection requirements and things like that need to be considered. And the leadership here at IDS are always very cognizant of that and mindful to sort of defer to Dan and I in our dealings with that historically, rather than trying to conform everything to an American workflow, which I think is incredibly not just clever but necessary to this evolving space in Europe. So very much appreciate the company's kind of attention to that, and it's one of many things that sort of attracted us to join.
See, all I heard through all of that is wah, 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 wah. We wanted to work with Jonathan.
Yeah, that's
Full
right.
stop.
Oh,
Full
that
stop.
Does that even need to be said? That just goes without saying. Come on.
Yeah, well, I figured in case the audience didn't understand that, I'd just make it blatantly obvious for them. So, well, listen, gents, appreciated your time today for our first Transatlantic Tea Time. Look forward to many more. We've laid the groundwork. People now know who the two of you are. In some future podcasts, we'll talk about all sorts of things. Perhaps the difference between e-discovery and e-disclosure, or some more fun things like how little I know about English Premier Soccer, or the sorry lower tier teams that apparently I've been accused of supporting.
Well, you just called it soccer, so there's your first red card.
Yeah,
right
I
there.
know. I know. Well, come on.
The proper way of saying aluminum versus aluminium, which is a debate that I keep going all day long on over here. So yeah.
Don't worry, Dan. I think in podcasts 5 or 6, we'll be doing the tomato, and then at one point we'll talk about what I should use a Z for and when I should use an S, and then maybe podcast 10 will be the importance of Z.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again. Thanks to everyone who listened to us today. Hope you subscribe to the podcast, and looking forward to our future Transatlantic tea times. Bye, guys.
Talk
Cheers.
to you, everyone.